What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Old Bull Athletics podcast. I'm Katie Dabrowski, and I'm here with the amazing Dr. Tim Springy Boy Alemi. More on that, why we call him that. But we wanted to chat with Tim today about all of his expertise and experience with every sport you can imagine, and especially youth athletes and athletic development, which we're really working on a ton here at Old Bull Athletics. So, Tim, go ahead and explain a little bit of what your background is, especially since you've done some extra training after receiving your doctorate of physical therapy. Talk a little bit about kind of all of the awesome stuff that you did post-grad and then where you're at now with us.
Awesome. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Like Katie said, I graduated from physical therapy school at University of Miami. While I was there, I got to work with the football team during my last internship. And then afterwards, I worked for a year just in a general outpatient orthopedic setting before deciding to go on to do a sports residency program out in Los Angeles. I moved out there, and it's about a 12 to 14 month program where you get to get a lot of exposure to on-field coverage for a wide array of sports. So I got over 400 hours of on-field experience working through acute injury, so when somebody gets injured on the field, and then learning how to rehab them all the way through, back to return to play and return to performance. So once I got done with that, I moved back and studied for the board exam to become a board certified sports clinical specialist in physical therapy, which I got in 2019. So been 4 years with my SCS and have been working for Old Bull for the past 3 years. We're using every skill that I gained while doing the residency and studying for the boards every day here at Old Bull.
What's awesome is that a lot of people, I think, don't realize the extra steps that you can go through as a physical therapist to get additional training. So in the physical therapy world, when we're going through our doctoral program, we're getting trained in like everything that you could imagine for any type of patient ever that would need physical therapy. So that's very acute stuff in a hospital all the way to sports training. But with a residency, it actually opens the door to gain even more experience in a really particular area. And then you have to sit for an additional board examination to be certified in it. So you've already taken one board exam, and then you've decided to take another because it's so much fun.
Absolutely.
But it just to show the level of dedication and what it takes to become board certified in a specialty like sports physical therapy. So we're really lucky to have Tim on our team for that, and to be able to share his expertise with all of us as the team, and then all of the patients that you get to work with. So one of my favorite things to talk to you about is definitely like some of the hot takes, I think, in the sports world, and maybe some myths or some things that we hear a lot about in the sports world, but maybe that you don't exactly agree with, and maybe why you don't agree with them, using your lens. So what are some of those topics that you believe in?
I think the biggest thing the biggest myth that's going around right now is that you have to specialize early on. As a kid, maybe you're only playing baseball all year round or soccer all year round, and you're doing that from a young age, like 8 or 9, all the way through your high school or collegiate career. Everybody wants to become a professional athlete, but really the thing that is going to benefit you the most is gaining as much skills from other sports before you specialize just in one. So you're trying to maximize your athleticism before you specialize on just one skill set. We see a lot that people might have a lot of skill in one particular area, but not necessarily that they're good athletes. You see it with football players that go and throw out the first pitch and they've never thrown a baseball before, after they get drafted, and they throw it into the dugout. So I think what we see is a lot of professional athletes actually were 3-sport athletes in high school, or played a lot of different sports growing up, and were able to take the skills from one sport and transfer it over into their main sport as they grew up. If you're able to play in a lot of different sports, you're not specializing early. That's going to help to avoid burnout and prevent overuse injuries. In particular, like in baseball, people that are throwing year-round, they're the ones that might need Tommy John or an elbow surgery, a lot earlier in their career. So I think if you can gain some experience, playing in other sports and training in the off season and taking some time away from just all year with one sport, that'll benefit you the most as you go through your athletic development.
And that can be very counterintuitive, because I feel like we want to think, okay, if I just do this one sport forever all the time, I'm going to be phenomenal at it, case closed. But if we're thinking about like developing a well-rounded athlete and what that looks like and how many years that takes and what exposure to different things that requires, I know I can speak for myself on this. Coming from a background of rowing, I did not really develop a ton of like things that would normally look very athletic.
Yeah.
A lot of agility, a lot of like plyometric, springy boy type stuff.
Right.
And I feel like later in life I'm learning those skills. And I loved rowing. I went to college for rowing. It was a fantastic experience. But I often think of like if I was exposed to several other things and developed different skills, like what that would look like. Maybe I wouldn't be learning to jump now in my 30s. But so definitely that's a huge important thing that I think is helpful for parents to understand for their kids too, and for kids to give them some freedom to like play and explore a little bit.
I think free play is important because it's going to help to expose the athlete to different movements that they wouldn't normally be in, and become more creative movers to solve certain tasks and come up with different solutions for a specific exercise.
Like I mentioned, one of my favorite things is to be able to talk to you about your experience in your residency, your experience with youth athletes, and I always take like pearls of wisdom essentially from ways to think about and conceptualize why it's important to develop a lot of different skills in somebody's like proverbial athleticism toolkit essentially. There was a really good analogy with buckets and things like that. Can you explain a little bit about that analogy of that, athleticism and how people can develop it as a youth athlete?
100%. So I heard this really good analogy a while ago from Eric Cressy. He was explaining developing your athleticism in terms of a bucket, and basically the liquid that goes into that bucket being the skill set. So if your bucket is a very small bucket, you're going to maximize how much water you can put into that, so how many skills that you can develop in your given sport very quickly. If you're constantly just playing that one sport all the time and not focusing on like an off-season training program or playing other sports, you're really putting a ceiling on how great you can get in that one area. So if we can take the time to do some off-season training to improve your speed, power, jumping ability, your agility, things like that, that's going to help to grow the size of your bucket so that when you go to play your sport later on, you'll be able to fill it with more liquid and gain more skills in your specific sport.
Yeah, and I think that's huge, especially with like creating buy-in for some of the younger kids that you work with, and helping people and helping their parents understand like why there's a lot of benefit to, when you're on the field, that's when you're training for your sport. When you're off the field in the weight room or doing sprint work or speed work, you're having this opportunity to tap into all of these other components of their athleticism.
Absolutely.
And maybe not every drill in the weight room needs to perfectly mimic their sport, because if they're playing their sport, they're getting that. But you can help them work on just like developing them as a better athlete, a better human, a better, being prepared for whatever their sport might throw at them. And I think that's huge.
We want to prepare them for the demands of their sport, but by growing their athleticism, grows their overall athletic potential while they go back to playing their sport. So the transfer of skills from in here to on the field is hugely important. That's why we want to be training for improved strength, power, agility, and speed, things like that.
And I think if some of that stuff was just even better explained, I think when we were growing up and playing sports, I just think so much of like what I would have gotten from that. I think it's really cool to be able to impart that type of information to somebody as young as 10 years old playing their sport, and helping kids realize even sooner on that there's so much they can do, and that could be fun to work on getting ready and getting more prepared for their sport. So since you work with a lot of youth athletes, and we do have our Young Bulls program going on right now in Pinecrest, which is an awesome summer training program developed for youth athletic development of skills, agility, power, speed, strength, all of those amazing things. And you've written a great program for that to develop those skills. So what are things that you like to work on or make sure to prioritize when you're training these young bulls? What are some of those things that you like to work on with them?
Yeah, like we were just talking about before, where you want to be developing their overall athleticism over, the long term. So we're really trying to prioritize building a base so they know how to move really well before we start adding a lot of weight to them. I know when I first started training, I'm sure Frankie as well, first started training, where, your first day in the weight room, they load up how much can you squat and just see how well you can do it. I don't think I was a very good squatter, even though I was moving a lot of weight. It wasn't necessarily with good form. My back always hurt, my hips hurt, my knees hurt. Everything was like, I needed a week to recover between training sessions for my legs. So making sure people are efficient movers and doing it really well. Taking the time to go through a motor learning process so they can, so athletes know what they're doing and what's expected of them, how to go through a greater range of motion. The weights are going to come, especially with high school athletes.
Yeah.
They're going through a very important change in their life, in their development. So the weights are going to come, as long as they're moving effectively and efficiently, then we're going to see a huge growth spurt and a lot of increase in their weights. So in the first half of the program, you're really focusing more on like general skills and proper movement patterns, and then the closer it gets to being in their season, we're starting to increase the speed and the power and the velocity aspect of their training, so they're moving really fast and with more specificity towards their sport. So it's more general in the beginning, and then it becomes more specific as the off season goes on.
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point about the weights will come, and working on being efficient movers is really important. I think right now there's a whole debate in the therapy and training world of like, does form matter or not? And I think there tends to be like really extreme camps where form has to be perfect or you die, or form doesn't matter at all. That's like this movement nihilism kind of. And I think it's an important distinction for like when you're working with people who are new to this stuff, this is where like take the time to find their most optimal position and make them the most efficient mover they can be. And it might look a little bit different, but I think it's cool to expose kids to that from the very beginning. And then, they get all of those amazing neurological adaptations and changes as being new to strength training, which is exciting to see strength gains. In addition to developmentally, they're going to be building more muscle right now, and they're just growing.
Absolutely.
So that's awesome. Like talking about, going from really general and then moving toward more specific goals. That's helpful, and even explaining to kids and parents like how you're structuring things the way that you do. So something that we run into in this industry a lot is if we're used to working with older adults, you don't necessarily have to make things as fun because they're coming in to make gains and you can help them with that. I think what's hard and the biggest challenge with kids is making stuff fun. Like how do you incorporate that into your programming when you're working with the young bulls?
Absolutely. So I think it's important to mix in some things that are gamifying, some of the drills that we're trying to accomplish, especially with the youth population. So we try to come up with certain games, whether it could just be like, you're playing tag or catching each other, racing each other. Something to make it a little bit more competitive definitely makes it more fun. Anything with a ball, typically, how far can you throw it? How fast can you throw this? Catch this, chase that, things like that are really, really helpful in making these exercises, more fun. We're trying to, make sure that these kids know that exercise can be really fun, and we want to promote that lifestyle for a lifetime.
Yeah, I like the idea of like gamification and just making them work on skills and they don't even realize it is awesome.
For sure.
And I think we've talked about it before, but a big part about being at that age where you're developing and you're becoming more athletic is also just like learning about how your body moves and how you respond to different things. So some of my favorite things that I've watched you do with people is just like setting something up and saying, jump over that.
Yeah.
And having them just figure out how to do it and how to organize themselves. Like motor learning occurs when you are just trying a lot of different things and exploring and getting more efficient, and your brain and your muscles is just learning all of that. So I think that's an awesome thing to highlight, is just like being able to help kids explore how their body works and how it moves.
Certainly, yeah. We're trying to give less cueing, if it's unnecessary cueing. We want to only provide it where it's necessary. So if somebody needs, they're doing something outside of the acceptable envelope of a movement pattern, then we can, intervene at that point. But otherwise, we're letting them figure it out for themselves. It's going to get better with repetition and through the motor learning process.
And it makes it less stressful and fun too. If you're hyper fixated on that, I mean, a kid's going to pick up on that and feel that they're being really watched, right. And that there's
pressure.
There's a ton of pressure, and they probably have enough pressure in school and on the field anyway.
Right.
What are some things that, like, if you're assessing kind of at a baseline for some of these youth athletes, what are some typical things that you really want to get numbers on, data on, even just like subjective and qualitative results on when you're first assessing a young athlete?
Yeah, so my movement assessment for everybody that comes in typically includes like a double leg squat, a single leg squat, a lunge, a jump, and a single leg hop, and then that kind of lets me know where our point of entry is on where we can intervene. I like to see, push-up form, plank form, things like that. I'd love to get, some pull-up information as well if people are able to complete that. Moving on to some more advanced stuff, we have a jump mat. We can measure, vertical jump height and broad jump distance here on our turf, and even further, specific is looking up like single leg hop for distance, for time, and any shuttle runs that we can go through. So those are some examples of some of the measures that we like to look at.
Yeah, and being able to have that data at the start, and then at another time point, and then preseason or postseason is awesome information. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Tim Springy Boy Alemi.
Jump over stuff.
Yeah, often, very often. So if you ever walk into Old Bull, chances are you're going to see Tim doing some outrageous jump and plyometric activity. But we're really excited to have you, and to have you for all of these years, and to help develop the programs to help the amazing student athletes we have in Miami. I think it's also important to note that I know we're talking about youth athletic development, but it knows no age or no bounds. So I think also, if you're listening to this and you're no longer in the high school glory years of your athletic career, but you want to continue to build some athleticism, you definitely can. And I love also being able to watch that with the people that you work with.
Yeah.
Just making people feel that bit of athleticism, no matter what phase of life that you're in, it's important. So I think that's another important thing to hit on, that everybody can be athletic, everybody can work on plyometrics and agility and running and jumping and springy boy and gal things. So thank you so much for sharing a lot of your expertise and knowledge with us. We're really excited for these continual programs that we're offering for youth athletes and anybody interested in learning more about what we're working on. You can visit us on Instagram, on our website, and get to work directly with Tim in some of these group programs or one-on-one. So thank you guys so much. We are Old Bull Athletics, and we really appreciate you tuning in.
Thank you.